Okay, let's take a look at some of the muscles on the posterior shoulder. And when I say shoulder, we're talking about the glenohumeral joint. So we have to review some of the muscles of the scapula, and then we'll talk about the arm. Okay, arm being the humerus. So from the posterior view, again, right here at the top, this would be the supraspinatus. Again, I'm saying top because this is upside down, right? You can see the elbow here, and here's the scapula, and this is the stand that the arm model is on. So supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and then right here we see the two teres brothers, teres minor, teres major, with the long head of the triceps that pierces between both, right? It gets sandwiched between teres minor and teres major. Here's the superficial deltoid. What we see here is the posterior deltoid, and more on the lateral side is the middle deltoid. Now we can't see the anterior deltoid because we're not looking at it from the anterior view. But if we flipped it around, and we'll be able to see the anterior deltoid. Now, triceps, when we look at the word tricep, tri means three. So we've already identified the long head of the triceps. That's easy to identify because it gets sandwiched between teres minor and teres major. On the outside, on the lateral part of the arm, is the lateral head of the triceps brachii. And all the way on the inside is the medial head, right here. You can see this little green line that delineates and separates out the long head from the medial head. So you have the medial head, the lateral head, and the long head of the triceps. Now, all three heads are going to insert on the olecranon process of the elbow, right? The olecranon process is on the distal end of which bone? I'm sorry, let's try that again. The olecranon process is on the proximal end of which bone? That would be the ulna, right? That's the part that you end up leaning your elbow on the table. Okay, so let's review. Here's the deltoid. Supraspinatus, which abducts the shoulder. Infraspinatus does shoulder external rotation. Teres minor, external rotation. Teres major, shoulder internal rotation. What do the triceps do? Well, all three of them extend the elbow. So if you ever get asked on an exam, you would say elbow extension. Two words, right? Elbow extension rather than extension of the elbow. It's easy to write two words on an exam than four. Always put the joint and then the action. Elbow extension. Now, the triceps brachii has an attachment. It actually crosses the shoulder joint. Because it crosses the shoulder, it has to act on the shoulder, right? General rule of thumb is if a muscle crosses the joint, it has to act on the joint. Again, general rule of thumb, if a muscle crosses the joint, it has to act upon that joint. If it crosses the elbow, it's got to act on the elbow. If it crosses the shoulder, it's got to act on the shoulder. So only the long head crosses the shoulder joint because it actually has its origin on the infraglenoid tubercle. So since it's a posterior muscle, it's going to be responsible for shoulder extension. Shoulder extension. Shoulder extension. Okay. If we take a look here, at the posterior portion, now we could take a look. This is a little bit more of a lateral view of the arm, but it gives you a nice perspective of looking at the triceps brachii on the posterior aspect. And then we start moving to the front, to the anterior part. So we have triceps brachii. As we start moving all the way anterior on that arm, it's the biceps brachii. Okay, so triceps brachii, biceps brachii. And then this muscle that looks like it's getting sandwiched between is the brachialis. Okay, so if it's an anterior muscle of the arm, it's going to flex the elbow. And if it's a posterior muscle of the arm, it's going to extend the elbow. So we have elbow flexors and we have elbow extensors. Elbow flexors, elbow extensors. If a muscle's in the front, it's got to move the forearm to the front, which is flexion. If the muscle's in the back, it's going to move the forearm back, which is elbow extension. Here's the deltoid. So this is the anterior deltoid, and this is more middle deltoid. And what we're seeing right here is a bit of pec major. Okay. I'm going to come back to these muscles in just a second. Let me just see from the anterior side. Okay, here again is the anterior scapula. So now we can see the subscapularis along with teres major. Now the subscapularis, that was your internal rotator. And I told you earlier that the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, and the teres minor all insert on the greater tubercle. So where does the subscapularis insert? That has to be the lesser tubercle of the humerus. So supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, those three rotator cuff muscles have a common insertion site that is on the greater tubercle, and the subscapularis inserts on the lesser tubercle. Here is the coracoid process. And now on that last picture that we looked at, it was kind of cut off, right? It was cut off, so kind of all we saw was like something that looked like this, where it showed the coracobrachialis originating on the coracoid process. And I said, here's the short head of the biceps. Well, in this view, now you can see the full picture, kind of puts it in perspective. So here is the biceps brachii, short head. Here's the coracobrachialis. Now, because these muscles are in the front, the coracobrachialis is responsible for shoulder flexion, and the biceps brachii, this muscle can also flex the shoulder or shoulder flexion. Since the biceps brachii crosses the elbow, it'll flex the elbow. So what's the action of the biceps brachii? At the shoulder joint, it's shoulder flexion. At the elbow joint, elbow flexion. But there's one other important, very important action of the biceps brachii that people forget. Supination. It supinates the forearm. So the biceps brachii, and to give you a practical application of this, if you were to hold your pen or a pencil in your right hand and you bend your elbow at 90 degrees and you put your left hand on your biceps and you turn clockwise, like you're tightening something with your right hand, well, as you're tightening something with your right hand and your forearm are supinating. And what you feel at the bicep is contraction. So the biceps brachii is a very, very powerful supinator when the elbow is flexed at 90 degrees. The biceps brachii is a very, very powerful supinator when the elbow is bent at 90 degrees. It's a lot easier for you to tighten something with your elbow bent than it is to tighten something with your elbow fully extended. Because with the elbow fully extended, when you try and tighten something, you're taking out the biceps brachii from contracting, and you're using less muscles. So it's better to recruit a powerful muscle. Okay, so there's the biceps brachii short head. This is anterior, and now we're moving posteriorly. We could see the triceps brachii, and this is the long head. And from the posterior view, we'd see it getting sandwiched between teres minor and teres major. Following the long head, because that's on the medial side, we'll find the medial head of the triceps brachii. Okay, I'll come back and we'll make another video here of the forearm. I just wanted you to take a look at what we have of the scapula and the upper arm. Okay, so the biceps and the triceps are completely antagonistic to one another, right? The rules of antagonism or antagonistic muscles, they will do opposite things if they're on opposite sides of the bone, right? Biceps are in the front, triceps in the back. So at the proximal end, the biceps will flex the shoulder. Well, on the posterior side, the long end of the triceps will do shoulder extension. So you got shoulder flexion in the front, shoulder extension in the back. At the distal end, the biceps brachii does elbow flexion, and the triceps brachii does elbow extension. So again, they're completely antagonistic. The only unique feature that the biceps have that the triceps don't have is that the biceps can supinate the forearm, whereas the triceps does not pronate the forearm. That's kind of like just a unique feature there. Okay. Let's make sure we're doing well here. Perfect.